Welcome back to Her True Stories, where we share real accounts of courage, transformation, and the incredible power that comes from finally believing in yourself. I'm your host, and today we have a story that will make you question everything you think you know about pursuing your dreams later in life. This is the story of Marilyn Ashford, a 58-year-old woman whose daughter destroyed her hand-drawn art designs and told her to get a real job. What happened next is a masterclass in the art of silent revenge and the beauty of proving everyone wrong. If you've ever been told your creative dreams are just hobbies, if you've ever been dismissed because of your age, if you've ever wondered whether it's too late to start over, this story is for you. Marilyn's journey from heartbreak to international success will show you that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is extraordinary achievement. Before we begin, I want you to hit that like button if you believe it's never too late to pursue your passions, and subscribe to our channel if you're ready to hear more stories of ordinary people achieving extraordinary things. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful testimonies of resilience and vindication. Now, let's dive into Marilyn's story. But I have to warn you, what her daughter did to her precious artwork will break your heart, and what Marilyn did in response will leave you cheering. This is a story about the devastating power of dismissal, the quiet strength of determination, and the sweetest kind of success, the kind that speaks for itself. Here's what happened when a 58-year-old woman decided she was done asking permission to dream. My name is Marilyn Ashford, and at 58, I thought I understood heartbreak. I had buried my husband 2 years earlier, sold our family home, and moved in with my daughter to help us both through difficult times. I thought the worst pain was behind me. I was wrong. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday when my world shifted forever. I sat at Heather's kitchen table, surrounded by the gentle chaos of my art supplies, colored pencils, fine-tip markers, and sheets of high-quality paper that I bought with the small savings I had left. The kitchen light cast a warm glow over my latest creation, an intricate textile design inspired by the Victorian gardens my late husband David and I used to visit. This wasn't just a hobby for me. These designs were my lifeline, my way of processing grief while creating something beautiful. Each delicate brushstroke represented hours of meditation, of healing, of hope that maybe I could build something meaningful from the ashes of my old life. I had been working for months on a portfolio, dreaming of maybe, possibly, finding a way to turn my art into income. At 58, starting over felt impossible, but these designs made me feel alive again. They made me feel like Marilyn Ashford still had something valuable to offer the world. The front door slammed, shaking the small apartment. Heather was home from another late night at her marketing job, and I could hear her frustration in every heavy footstep. "Mom? Why are all the lights on?" Her voice carried that edge it had developed over the past 6 months, sharp, impatient, as if my very existence was an inconvenience. "I'm just finishing up," I called softly. "I'll clean up in a minute." Heather appeared in the doorway, still in her work clothes, her blonde hair disheveled and her makeup smudged. At 29, she was beautiful in the way that youth makes everything beautiful, but there was something harsh in her eyes that hadn't been there when she was younger. She looked at my spread of artwork with the expression someone might reserve for a pile of garbage. "You're still doing this?" "I'm working on my portfolio." "Portfolio?" She laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking. "Mom, you're 58 years old. This isn't a portfolio. This is a hobby. A childish hobby." I felt my chest tighten. "I think they're getting quite good," Mrs. Patterson next door said. Mrs. Patterson is 80 and half blind. She'd compliment a crayon drawing. Heather moved closer to the table, and I instinctively wanted to protect my work. "Mom, when are you going to accept reality? You're not some undiscovered artist. You're a widow living in her daughter's apartment, playing with colored pencils like a kindergartner." "Heather, please." "Please what?" "Please keep pretending this is anything more than you avoiding getting a real job." She reached for her wine glass, her third of the evening, I noticed, and in her dramatic gesture, she knocked it over. Red wine splashed across my designs, immediately soaking into the papers I had spent weeks perfecting. I gasped, grabbing for the drawings, but it was too late. Months of work were destroyed in seconds. "Oh no," I whispered, holding up a design that was now streaked with burgundy stains.
Oh, no, no, no. See?
This is exactly what I mean. Heather didn't even apologize. Instead, she grabbed a paper towel and began roughly wiping the table, further smearing the wine into my artwork. "This is a waste of time. You need to get a real job, Mom. You need to contribute to this household instead of sitting around playing artist all day." I sat frozen, watching my daughter, my only child, the little girl I had raised to be kind and compassionate, destroy my work without a flicker of remorse. I could try to save some of these. I started, but Heather cut me off. "Stop it.
Just stop it.
You're embarrassing yourself." She crumpled up one of my designs and threw it in the trash. "I work 10 hours a day to keep this roof over our heads while you sit here making pretty pictures. Do you know how that makes me feel? Do you know how it looks to my friends?" Her words hit me like physical blows. "I didn't know you felt that way." "Of course you didn't know. You're too busy living in your little fantasy world to notice that you're a burden." A burden. The word echoed in my mind as I looked at my daughter. This stranger, who looked like Heather but spoke with the voice of someone I didn't recognize. "I'm trying to build something," I said quietly. "I'm trying to find a way to be independent again." "By drawing flowers?" "Mom, wake up. You're 58. Nobody's going to hire you to doodle. Nobody cares about your artistic vision. You need to get a job at a grocery store or something. Something real." She left then, stomping to her bedroom and slamming the door so hard that a picture fell off the wall. I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of my dreams. Wine had soaked through most of my designs, rendering them unsalvageable. I carefully picked up the pieces that might be saved, but my hands were shaking. As I cleaned up the mess, I thought about the past 6 months since I'd moved in with Heather. The little comments about my playing around with art, the eye rolls when I mentioned my projects, the way she introduced me to her friends as my mom who's going through a creative phase. I had thought she was being supportive. I had thought she understood that art was my way of healing, of finding myself again after losing David. But I had been wrong. In Heather's eyes, I wasn't a woman rediscovering her passion. I was a pathetic old lady playing with crayons, too delusional to accept that my life was essentially over. I picked up one of the least damaged designs, a delicate pattern of intertwining roses that I had based on the garden where David proposed to me 35 years ago. Half of it was stained beyond repair, but I could still see the beauty in what remained. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I would never explain myself to Heather again. I would never defend my dreams to someone who saw them as embarrassment. And I would never, ever let her make me feel small again. As I carefully placed my surviving artwork in a protective folder, I began to plan. Not revenge. That would come later, naturally, as a consequence of Heather's choices. But escape. Freedom. A life where my art mattered, where my dreams had value, where I could be Marilyn Ashford instead of just Heather's mother. I spent the rest of the night researching apartments online, quietly packing my most essential belongings and making a promise to myself. I would prove that 58 was not too old to start over. I would prove that my childish hobby had value. And I would do it all without saying a single word to my daughter about my plans. Heather had taught me that silence could be cruel. Now I was going to teach her that silence could also be powerful. Before we continue with Marilyn's incredible journey, I want to share something important with you. If you've ever been told you're too old to start over, let me tell you, that's a lie. Your story isn't over, and you still have chapters left to write. Our best-selling book, Reclaiming Your Peace After Pain, is filled with simple, powerful steps to help you heal, rebuild, and fall in love with life again. Click the link in the description box and start your new beginning today. And if Marilyn's story is speaking to your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful stories of resilience and justice. Trust me, you won't want to miss what Marilyn does next. For the next 2 weeks, I moved through Heather's apartment like a ghost with a purpose. Every morning, I woke before dawn and worked on my art in complete silence. I had managed to save 3 of my designs from the wine incident, and I was determined to create new ones that were even better. But now I worked with a different energy, not the gentle, healing meditation of before, but with the focused intensity of a woman who had something to prove. Heather barely noticed my new routine. She left for work at 8 a.m. and returned home after 7 p.m., usually in a mood that made conversation impossible.
Perfect.
Her indifference to my daily life had once hurt me. Now it was exactly what I needed. During the day, while she was at the office dismissing other people's dreams, I was quietly dismantling the life I had built in her space. I started with the things that mattered least: extra clothes, duplicate kitchen items, books I could easily replace. Each bag I packed felt like shedding weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. I found a small one-bedroom apartment across town. It wasn't much. $800 a month for a place with outdated fixtures and carpet that had seen better days. But it had 2 things that made it perfect. It was affordable on my small widow's pension, and it had a sunroom that would make an ideal art studio. The landlord, Mrs. Chun, was a kind woman in her 70s who took one look at my references and bank statements and said, "You seem like someone who appreciates quiet. I think you'll be happy here." Quiet. Yes, I was learning to appreciate quiet in ways I never had before. I arranged for utilities to be connected, found a secondhand furniture store that could deliver basics, and opened a new bank account that Heather didn't know about. Every transaction felt like an act of rebellion, every signature like reclaiming a piece of myself. The hardest part was packing my art supplies and the portfolio I had been building. These weren't just materials and papers. They were my hopes, my dreams, my proof that Marilyn Ashford still had something unique to offer the world. I wrapped each surviving design in tissue paper, treating them like the precious artifacts they were. One evening, as I was carefully packing my watercolors, Heather wandered into the kitchen. "You're organizing your stuff again," she observed with mild irritation. "Mom, I've told you, you don't need to keep everything so pristine. This isn't the museum." "I just like to keep my things neat," I replied, not looking up from my packing. "Whatever. Just don't spread out all over the table tonight. I'm bringing Marcus over for dinner." Marcus was her latest boyfriend, a man who worked in finance and spoke about money with the passion other people reserved for art or music. He had been to the apartment twice before, and both times he had looked at my art supplies with barely concealed disdain. "Of course," I said. "I'll make sure everything is put away." That night, I listened to them in the dining room, discussing property investments and vacation homes while I sat in my bedroom, wrapping my most delicate brushes in protective cloth. Their conversation was peppered with casual dismissals of people they considered beneath them. "She's just a secretary. He's never going to amount to anything. They don't understand how the real world works." I wondered if Heather spoke about me that way when I wasn't around. My mom? Oh, she's going through this artistic phase. It's kind of embarrassing, but what can you do? She's 58 and has these delusions about being an artist. The thought didn't hurt as much as it should have. Instead, it strengthened my resolve. On my second to last night in Heather's apartment, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my old friend Sandra. Sandra Pierce had been the owner of a small but prestigious art gallery downtown before retiring 5 years earlier. We had met through David's work. He had been an accountant for several local businesses, including Sandra's gallery, and had maintained a friendship built on our shared love of art and good conversation. Marilyn. Sandra's voice was warm with genuine pleasure. I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up, dear? I'm changing, I said carefully. Sandra, I know this might sound strange, but would you be willing to look at some artwork I've been creating? I value your opinion, and I need an honest assessment. Of course. What kind of work have you been doing? Textile designs. Patterns for fabric, wallpaper, that sort of thing. I know it's not gallery art, but nothing. Good design is good design, regardless of the medium. When can you come by? We arranged to meet the following evening. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. Not the nervous hope I had felt when working on my designs in Heather's kitchen, but genuine excitement about sharing my work with someone who understood art. My last morning in Heather's apartment, I woke at 5 a.m. and made myself coffee in the kitchen where my dreams had been shattered 2 weeks earlier. I sat at the same table where Heather had destroyed my work, but now I felt different. Stronger. More purposeful. I had arranged for the moving truck to come while Heather was at work. 3 hours, and my entire life would be transported to a place where I could start over. Before I left, I wrote a note and placed it on the kitchen table where Heather would find it when she came home. Heather, thank you for teaching me that my time is worth more than I thought. I've found my own place and will be moving today. I'll call you when I'm settled. Your mother, Marilyn. P.S. I've left some money on your dresser to cover my share of this month's utilities. I didn't write love, Mom. I didn't write anything about missing her or staying in touch or hoping we could work things out. Those words felt dishonest now. Love wasn't supposed to feel like walking on eggshells. Love wasn't supposed to require me to make myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. As I walked out of Heather's apartment for the last time, carrying my carefully packed art supplies, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Pure, clean relief, like taking off shoes that had been too tight for so long you'd forgotten what comfortable felt like. I was 58 years old, and I was starting my life over. Heather had meant to shame me with those words, but instead, she had given me the greatest gift possible, the motivation to prove her wrong. The moving truck pulled away from Heather's building, carrying my meager possessions toward an uncertain but hopeful future. In the passenger seat beside me, carefully secured in a protective case, was my portfolio of textile designs. I had no idea that within 6 months, one of those designs would change my life forever. I had no idea that the childish hobby Heather had mocked would become the foundation of a career that would make me financially independent for the first time since David's death. All I knew was that I was free. Free to create without judgment, free to dream without ridicule, free to discover who Marilyn Ashford could become when she wasn't constantly defending her right to exist. The silence in my car was profound, but it wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. My new apartment was smaller than any place I had lived since college, but it felt like a palace. The living room was barely large enough for a couch and coffee table, the kitchen could fit only one person at a time, and the bedroom was so tiny that I had to choose between a dresser and a reading chair. But the sunroom, the sunroom was perfect. It faced east, so morning light flooded through the windows, illuminating everything with a kind of golden glow that made even ordinary objects look magical. I set up my easel by the largest window, arranged my art supplies on a simple wooden table I'd bought at a thrift store, and hung my 3 surviving wine-stained designs on the wall as a reminder of how far I'd already come. For the first week, I did nothing but create. I woke with the sunrise and worked until my eyes grew tired, taking breaks only to eat simple meals and walk around the neighborhood. Without Heather's constant criticism echoing in my mind, my creativity flowed like water from a broken dam. I designed patterns inspired by everything around me, the way shadows fell across my neighbor's garden, the intricate wrought iron details on the building across the street, the delicate frost patterns that appeared on my windows during cold mornings. Each design was more confident than the last, more bold, more uniquely mine. It was during my second week of solitude that Sandra called. "Marilyn, dear, I hope you're settling in well. Are you ready for that visit we discussed?" I had almost forgotten about our arrangement in the euphoria of my newfound creative freedom. "Yes, absolutely. When would be convenient for you? How about this afternoon? I'm curious to see what you've been working on." Sandra's house was a converted Victorian that had served as her gallery for 20 years before becoming her retirement home. Every wall was covered with carefully curated artwork. Paintings, photographs, sculptures, and mixed media pieces that spoke to her sophisticated eye for beauty and craftsmanship. "Welcome to my sanctuary," she said, leading me into a sitting room where afternoon light filtered through stained glass windows. "Now, show me what you've been creating." I opened my portfolio with nervous hands. These designs represented everything I had worked toward since leaving Heather's apartment. They were proof that I could create something beautiful, something valuable, something worth taking seriously. Sandra examined each piece in silence, occasionally making small sounds of interest or approval. She held them at different angles to catch the light, studied the details with a magnifying glass, and took notes in a small leather journal. "Marilyn," she said finally, "these are extraordinary." I felt my heart skip. "Really? Really? The complexity of the patterns, the way you've balanced traditional motifs with contemporary sensibilities. This is sophisticated design work. Professional quality. But they're just patterns for fabric. Just patterns?" Sandra looked at me with raised eyebrows. "Marilyn, do you have any idea how much the textile industry pays for original designs of this caliber?" I shook my head. "Thousands of dollars. Sometimes tens of thousands, depending on the client and the exclusivity of the design." She pulled out her phone. "I'm going to make a call." "Sandra, what are you doing?" "I'm calling my friend Alexander, who works as a creative director for Morrison Textiles. They supply fabrics to high-end fashion houses and interior designers. He's always looking for fresh talent." "Oh, I don't think I'm ready for something like that." "Nonsense. Marilyn, confidence is a choice. You can choose to see yourself as a woman playing with a hobby, or you can choose to see yourself as an artist with something valuable to offer. Which choice serves you better?" The question hit me like a revelation. For months, I had been letting Heather's voice in my head define how I saw my work. But what if I chose to listen to Sandra instead? What if I chose to believe that my art had value? "Make the call," I said. Alexander Winters turned out to be a man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of confident bearing that comes from years of working with beautiful things. He met us at Sandra's house 2 days later, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression of polite interest that I recognized as professional courtesy. "Sandra speaks very highly of your work," he said as I spread my designs on her dining room table. "May I?" He examined my patterns with the same careful attention Sandra had shown, but his evaluation felt different, more businesslike, more calculating. I tried to read his expression, but his face revealed nothing. "These are quite good," he said finally. "The Victorian Garden series especially. There's a timeless quality to them that would work well in luxury applications." "Thank you. I'd like to show these to my team. We're always looking for designers who understand the balance between classic elegance and contemporary appeal." He pulled out a business card. "Would you be interested in creating some trial pieces for us? There would be compensation, of course, even if we don't end up purchasing the designs." I took the card with hands that trembled slightly.
Yes.
"Yes, I would be very interested." "Excellent. I'll have my assistant send you the specifications for our current project. We're working with a client who's launching a high-end home decor line, wallpapers, upholstery fabrics, that sort of thing. If your work fits what they're looking for, this could be quite lucrative for you." After Alexander left, Sandra and I sat in her garden with tea and cake, watching the late afternoon sun paint everything in shades of gold. How do you feel?
Sandra asked.
Terrified, I admitted. What if I'm not good enough? What if they look at my work and realize I'm just a 58-year-old woman playing with colored pencils? Marilyn, look at me. Sandra's voice was firm, but kind. Do you know what I see when I look at your work? What? I see 30 years of life experience translated into visual beauty. I see the eye of a woman who has loved deeply, grieved honestly, and emerged from pain with something meaningful to offer the world. Young designers can create pretty patterns, but they can't create the depth of feeling that comes from having truly lived. You really think I can do this? I think you're the only one who can do this. These designs could only have come from someone with your particular combination of technical skill, life experience, and artistic vision. That night, I sat in my sunroom studio and looked at my work with new eyes. These weren't the desperate scribblings of a woman trying to avoid reality. They were the professional creations of an artist who had something valuable to offer. Heather had called my art a waste of time, a childish hobby, an embarrassment. But what if Heather was wrong? What if my art was actually the most important thing I had ever done? I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began sketching a new design, something bold and confident and unapologetically beautiful. As I worked, I thought about the specifications Alexander would send, about the possibility of seeing my patterns transformed into luxurious fabrics, about proving to myself that it was never too late to build a meaningful career. Somewhere across town, Heather was probably having dinner with Marcus, discussing their practical plans for practical success. She had no idea that her mother, the woman she had dismissed as a burden, was about to embark on a journey that would transform everything. I worked until nearly midnight, lost in the flow of creation, surrounded by the profound silence of a life finally lived on my own terms. 3 months later, I was standing in my tiny kitchen at 6 a.m., staring at my phone and trying to convince myself that I had heard Alexander correctly. I'm sorry, could you repeat that number? $2 million, Marilyn. The client wants to purchase your English rose garden design for $2 million. My legs suddenly felt unsteady. I sat down heavily in my single kitchen chair, the one I had bought at a garage sale for $5. That's not possible. Oh, it's very possible. This particular client is launching a luxury brand that will compete with houses like Hermes and Chanel. Your design will be the centerpiece of their debut collection. Wallpapers, fabrics, accessories, everything. They want exclusive rights, which is why the price is so high. I looked around my modest apartment. The second-hand furniture, the discount store curtains, the refrigerator held closed with duct tape, and tried to process what Alexander was telling me. Are you sure they have the right artist? You're just what? Marilyn, you need to stop diminishing yourself. You created something extraordinary. This client recognizes that, and they're willing to pay accordingly. The design Alexander was referring to was one I had created during my 3rd week in the apartment. I had been thinking about the garden where David proposed, remembering the way the climbing roses had intertwined around the old stone arbor, creating patterns of shadow and light that seemed almost magical. I had spent 2 weeks perfecting every line, every curve, every delicate detail. When do they need an answer? I need to hear from you by tomorrow morning. This is a legitimate offer, Marilyn. I've done business with this client before. The check will clear. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, watching the morning light creep across my small table. $2 million. The number felt abstract, impossible, like something that happened to other people. I called Sandra. Marilyn, how are you, dear? Sandra, I think something incredible just happened, but I'm not sure I believe it. I told her about Alexander's call, about the offer, about my complete inability to process what this meant for my life. Oh, my dear girl, Sandra said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. This is real. This is happening. How does it feel to know that your childish hobby is worth $2 million? The phrase hit me like a thunderbolt. My childish hobby. The words Heather had used to dismiss my dreams, to make me feel foolish for believing I could create something meaningful. It feels like vindication, I said quietly. It should. Marilyn, this is just the beginning. Once word gets out that you've created $1 million design, every luxury brand will want to work with you. I spent the rest of the morning walking around my neighborhood, trying to understand how my life had changed so dramatically in a single phone call. I passed the coffee shop where I bought my daily cup of discount coffee, the thrift store where I shopped for clothes, the library where I spent hours because it was free entertainment. In 24 hours, none of that would matter anymore. I would be financially independent. I would be successful. I would be proof that 58 was not too old to start over. But more than that, I would be proof that Heather had been completely, utterly wrong about me. That evening, I called Alexander back. I accept the offer. Excellent. I'll have the contracts drawn up immediately. Marilyn, I hope you're prepared for this to change your life. I think I am.
Good.
And Marilyn? I have 3 other clients who would like to see your portfolio. Are you interested in taking on additional work? Additional work. As if I were already an established artist, as if this were the natural progression of a successful career, rather than a miracle that had fallen from the sky. Yes, I said, my voice growing stronger. I'm very interested. The contracts arrived the next day via courier. I read every word twice, called a lawyer to review the terms, and signed my name with a hand that barely trembled. When the courier left with the signed documents, I closed my apartment door and stood in my entryway, trying to absorb what had just happened. I was no longer a woman playing with a hobby. I was no longer a burden living off her daughter's charity. I was an artist whose work was valued at $2 million. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done since moving out of Heather's apartment. I called her. Mom. Heather sounded surprised to hear from me. How are you settling in? I meant to call, but work has been crazy. She hadn't meant to call. I knew that, and she knew that I knew, but it didn't matter anymore. I'm settling in very well, thank you. How are things with you?
Oh,
Same old stuff. Marcus and I are looking at condos, but everything decent is so expensive. And my job is, well, it's fine, but the pay isn't really keeping up with my ambitions. I could hear the stress in her voice, the frustration of someone whose life wasn't unfolding according to plan. 6 months ago, I would have offered to help. I would have suggested ways to stretch her budget, offered to contribute money I couldn't afford to spare. Now I simply listened. But anyway, enough about my problems. How's the art stuff going?
Are you still doing what do you call them?
Your designs. My designs. Not your hobby or your little drawings. Progress, perhaps, or maybe just politeness. Yes, I'm still creating. In fact, I just sold a piece. Oh, that's nice. How much did you get for it? The moment of truth. I could downplay it, make it sound modest, protect Heather from the shock of learning that her mother's childish hobby had just made her wealthy. Or I could tell the truth. $2 million. The silence stretched so long that I wondered if the call had dropped. Mom, did you say 2 million? I did. $2 million? Yes. Another long pause. That's not. Mom, are you feeling okay? Maybe you misunderstood. I didn't misunderstand anything, Heather. A luxury brand purchased one of my textile designs for $2 million. The contracts were signed this morning. That's impossible. And yet it happened. I could practically hear her mind racing, trying to process this information, trying to reconcile the image of her unemployed mother playing with colored pencils with the reality of a woman who had just earned more money than Heather made in 5 years. Mom, this is incredible. I mean, I always believed in your talent. No, you didn't. My voice was calm, matter of fact. You called it a waste of time. You said I needed to get a real job. I was just,
I was worried about you.
I didn't want you to get your hopes up. Of course. Mom, we should celebrate. Let me take you out to dinner. Somewhere really nice. My treat. That's thoughtful, Heather, but I'm quite busy with new commissions. Perhaps another time. New commissions? 3 other companies want to work with me. It seems that success breeds success in the art world. After I hung up, I sat in my sunroom studio and looked at the wine-stained designs hanging on my wall, the ones Heather had destroyed in her careless moment of cruelty. They had become my inspiration, my reminder of why I had left, why I had chosen silence over confrontation. Now they were about to become symbols of something else entirely, the moment when my real life began. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began sketching a new design. This one would be even better than the English rose garden. This one would be worth even more. And this one would prove, once and for all, that some dreams are worth pursuing no matter what anyone else thinks about them. 6 months after my first sale, I was living in a different world. Not just financially, although the money had certainly changed everything. I had moved to a beautiful townhouse in the Arts District with high ceilings, hardwood floors, and a 3rd-floor studio filled with natural light. I had professional-grade art supplies, custom storage for my growing portfolio, and a wardrobe that reflected my new status as a successful artist. But the real change was internal. I moved through the world differently now, with confidence, with purpose, with the quiet authority that comes from knowing your worth and having it acknowledged by others. My relationship with Morrison Textiles had evolved into something resembling a partnership. Alexander called me regularly with new projects, each one more prestigious than the last. Luxury hotels, high-end fashion houses, exclusive interior designers, they all wanted original Marilyn Ashford designs. I had also signed contracts with 2 other firms, Blackstone Luxury Goods and Heritage Fine Arts. My work was appearing in Architectural Digest, being featured in runway shows in New York and Paris, gracing the walls of million-dollar homes across the country. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Heather struggled with rent on her modest apartment, her mother, the woman she had called a burden, was building an empire. I maintained a deliberately low profile. No interviews, no social media presence, no public appearances. My clients loved the mystery of working with an anonymous artist whose identity was known only to a select few in the industry. They called me the ghost designer, the phantom of luxury patterns. My bank account grew steadily, but I lived modestly. Not out of frugality, but out of choice. I had learned the difference between having enough and having everything, between success and excess. I bought what I needed to create my best work: premium materials, proper equipment, a beautiful space to inspire me, but I felt no need to flaunt my wealth. The townhouse became my sanctuary. Every room was designed around my art, with walls that showcased my favorite pieces and storage that kept my materials organized and accessible. I had a small kitchen where I prepared simple, elegant meals, a reading nook where I researched historical textile patterns, and a bedroom with windows that faced east, so I could wake with the sun. But the studio was the heart of everything. It occupied the entire 3rd floor, with skylights that filled the space with perfect, even light throughout the day. My easels were positioned to catch different angles of illumination, my work tables were arranged for maximum efficiency, and my walls were covered with inspiration boards that sparked new ideas daily. I worked with the discipline of someone who had learned that opportunity doesn't wait for convenient moments. Every morning, I was at my easel by 7 a.m. I took breaks for meals and walks, but my focus was absolute. Creating beautiful patterns wasn't just my career, it was my passion, my meditation, my way of making sense of the world. The money kept growing. By the end of my first year as a professional artist, I had earned over $5 million. Not because I was greedy, but because excellent work commanded excellent compensation, and I had finally learned to accept what I was worth. I invested most of it conservatively, on the advice of a financial planner who specialized in artists and creatives. Real estate, bonds, diversified portfolios that would provide steady income for the rest of my life. I was building more than a career. I was building security, independence, freedom from ever having to depend on anyone else again. My social life was small but meaningful. Sandra and I had dinner twice a month, usually at my place, where we would discuss art, literature, and the strange journey that had brought me from Heather's kitchen table to international success. I had also developed friendships with a few other artists in the neighborhood, people who understood the creative process and respected the dedication it required. I rarely thought about Heather during this period, not out of anger, but out of simple irrelevance. She had become a minor character in the story of my life, someone whose opinion no longer mattered, whose approval I no longer sought. When she did cross my mind, it was with a kind of detached curiosity about how someone could be so wrong about another person they claimed to know well. My routine was peaceful, productive, and entirely my own. I woke when I wanted, worked when inspiration struck, traveled when I needed new inspiration for my designs. I had complete control over my time, my energy, my creative output. But I also knew this peaceful phase wouldn't last forever. Success has a way of attracting attention, and attention has a way of complicating even the most carefully constructed privacy. The first sign came when Alexander called with an unusual request. "Marilyn, I have an opportunity that's a bit different from your usual work." "What kind of opportunity?" "Pembroke House is launching their first textile collection in 50 years. They want to work exclusively with you, a full line of fabrics and wallpapers featuring your designs. It would be a 3-year contract worth approximately $15 million. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Even after a year of success, numbers like that still had the power to take my breath away. That's quite an offer. It is. But there's a catch.
They want to feature you in their marketing campaign.
Magazine spreads, a documentary about your creative process, appearances at industry events. They want to build the entire campaign around the story of the mysterious artist finally stepping into the light. I felt my stomach tighten. Privacy had been my shield, anonymity my protection. The idea of becoming a public figure felt like stepping into a minefield. I'll need to think about it, of course. But Marilyn, this would establish you as one of the premier textile designers in the world. This is the kind of opportunity that defines entire careers. After I hung up, I walked through my townhouse, considering what exposure would mean. My carefully constructed sanctuary would no longer be secret.
My name would be associated with my success.
People would know that Marilyn Ashford, the woman dismissed as a burden by her own daughter, had built an empire from the ashes of that humiliation. Including Heather, I had been content to succeed quietly, to prove my worth to myself and to the clients who valued my work. But perhaps it was time to let the world know that 58-year-old women were capable of extraordinary things. Perhaps it was time to let Heather know exactly how wrong she had been about everything. That evening, I called Alexander back. "I'll do it." "Excellent. They'll be thrilled. Marilyn, you're about to become the most famous textile designer in the industry." "Good," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "It's time." The contracts were more complex than anything I had signed before, but the terms were generous. Pembroke House would have exclusive rights to my designs for their collection, but I retained ownership of my techniques and could continue working with other clients on non-competing projects. More importantly, they agreed to let me maintain creative control over how my story was told. This wouldn't be a puff piece about a lucky amateur. It would be the true story of a professional artist who had overcome dismissal and doubt to achieve extraordinary success. The photography sessions began 3 weeks later. I spent a day at my townhouse studio with a team of photographers and stylists, documenting my creative process, my living space, my transformation from grieving widow to successful entrepreneur. I wore a simple black dress and my grandmother's pearl necklace, elegant, understated, timeless. The photographers captured me at my easel, surrounded by my work, looking every inch the serious artist I had become. "You have such an interesting face," the lead photographer told me. "Very photogenic. The camera loves those cheekbones." I smiled, thinking about all the years I had felt invisible, dismissible, unworthy of attention. Now professional photographers were discussing my bone structure, like I was a model instead of a 59-year-old woman who had spent most of her life being overlooked. The magazine spread would run in Architectural Digest, Vanity Fair, and Design weekly simultaneously. The documentary would air on the Arts and Culture Network. There would be gallery showings of my work, interviews with industry leaders about my impact on textile design, and features in newspapers across the country. In 3 months, everyone would know the name Marilyn Ashford, including my daughter. I didn't call Heather to warn her. I didn't prepare her for what was coming. She had taught me the power of silence, after all, and I had become an excellent student. Instead, I focused on my work, creating the most beautiful designs of my career for the Pemberton House collection. Each pattern was more sophisticated than the last, more confident, more undeniably the work of a master craftsperson. When the first magazine hit the stands, I was ready. When the documentary aired, I was prepared. When the phone started ringing with congratulations, interview requests, and new business opportunities, I answered with the calm professionalism of someone who had finally learned her worth. But when Heather called, I let it go to voicemail. After all, silence was golden, and I had spent a year learning to appreciate its value. The phone rang at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, 6 weeks after the Architectural Digest feature hit newsstands. I was in my studio, putting the finishing touches on a design inspired by Art Nouveau stained glass windows, when I saw Heather's name on the caller ID. I hadn't spoken to her since the day I told her about my first sale, nearly 8 months ago. I let it ring. The voicemail she left was casual, almost aggressively normal. "Hey Mom, it's me. Just checking in. I saw the craziest thing today. There was a woman in a magazine who looked just like you. Anyway, call me back when you get this. Love you." I deleted the message without calling back. She tried again the next morning, this time with a slight edge to her voice. "Mom, it's Heather. I really think we should talk. That magazine thing I mentioned? I'm pretty sure it actually was you. That's incredible, but also kind of confusing because you didn't mention anything about being in magazines. Call me." I was working on a series of botanical patterns when the third call came that afternoon. "Mom, okay, I know it was you in Architectural Digest. My friend Marcus saw it too. What the hell is going on? Why didn't you tell me you were some kind of famous artist? This is insane. Call me back immediately." Finally, on Thursday evening, as I was enjoying a glass of wine in my reading nook, Heather called for the 4th time. This time, I answered. "Hello, Heather." "Mom." "Finally. I've been trying to reach you for days. Why haven't you been answering?" "I've been working. What can I do for you?" "What can you do for me?" "Mom, you're in Architectural Digest. There's a 6-page spread about your art. When were you planning to mention this?" I could hear the mix of excitement and hurt in her voice, as if my success was something that had happened to her rather than something I had achieved on my own. "I didn't realize I needed to report my professional activities to you." "Professional activities?" "Mom, this isn't just professional activities. This is huge. The article says you're one of the most sought-after textile designers in the luxury market. It says your work sells for millions of dollars." "That's correct.
But how?
How did this happen? Last time we talked, you had just sold one design. Now you're living in some gorgeous townhouse, and there are art critics calling you a visionary talent. I don't understand. I worked hard, Heather. I developed my skills, I built relationships with clients, and I created beautiful work that people wanted to buy. But why didn't you tell me? I'm your daughter. I should have known about this. I paused, considering how to answer that question honestly. When would I have told you, Heather? During one of our regular conversations? Oh, wait. We haven't had any regular conversations. The last time we spoke was 8 months ago, and before that, I hadn't heard from you since I moved out of your apartment. I was giving you space to get settled. You were relieved to be rid of me. Which is fine, Heather. I understand that having your unemployed mother living with you was an embarrassment, but you can't have it both ways. You can't dismiss me as irrelevant and then expect to be included in my success. Mom, that's not fair. I never said you were irrelevant. You said my art was a childish hobby. You said I needed to get a real job. You destroyed my work and told me I was wasting my time. I was frustrated. I was working so hard, and it seemed like you were just playing around. I didn't mean to hurt you, but you did hurt me. And now you're upset because I succeeded without your support or approval. There was a long silence. When Heather spoke again, her voice was smaller, more uncertain. Mom, I know I wasn't supportive before. I was stressed about money and work, and I took it out on you. But I want to make up for that now. I want to be part of your success. Part of my success? I mean, I want to celebrate with you. I want to be proud of you. I am proud of you. You're proud of me now that my worth has been validated by magazines and money. Where was that pride when I was creating art in your kitchen? I should have been more encouraging. I can see that now. Yes, you should have been. Another pause. Mom, look, I know I made mistakes, but we're family. Can't we move past this? I looked around my beautiful studio, at the walls covered with my successful designs, at the evidence of everything I had built without her help or blessing. Heather, can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you calling me now? What do you want from this conversation? I want to reconnect with my mother. I want us to have a relationship again. That's all.
Well,
I mean, I'd love to see your new place. And I'd love to hear about your work. And honestly, Mom, I'm going through a tough time financially. I had to quit my job because my boss was horrible, and I'm trying to start my own marketing business, but it's really expensive to get things off the ground. There it was. The real reason for the call. I see. I'm not asking for a handout or anything, but maybe you could give me some advice? Or maybe help me understand how you built your business so quickly. I mean, you went from 0 to millions in just over a year. There must be some secrets you could share. Secrets. As if my success were the result of luck or insider knowledge rather than talent, hard work, and the determination to prove someone wrong. The secret, Heather, is that I spent 30 years developing my artistic skills while raising you and supporting David. When I finally had the freedom to focus on my work without interruption or criticism, I was ready. Okay, but how did you find clients? How did you price your work? How did you negotiate contracts? I had help from people who believed in my talent. People who saw value in my work before it was profitable. People like who? Like Sandra Pierce, who introduced me to the right connections because she saw potential in my art. Like Alexander Winters, who took a chance on an unknown artist because he recognized quality work. Could you introduce me to them? Maybe they could help me with my business too. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. Even now, even with all the evidence of my success laid out in magazines and documentaries, Heather still saw me primarily as a resource to be tapped. Heather, I don't think that would be appropriate. Why not? You just said they help people with potential. They help artists, Heather. People with creative talent who need support developing their careers. That's not the same as helping someone start a marketing business. But you could still put in a good word for me, right? Tell them I'm your daughter. And what would that accomplish? It might open some doors. I mean, if you're as successful as these articles say, your recommendation would mean something. I felt something cold settle in my chest. After all this time, after all my success, Heather still saw me as someone whose primary value was what I could do for her. Heather, let me ask you something else. If I had never become successful, if I had remained the unemployed woman living in your spare room, would you have called me tonight? That's a weird question, Mom. It's a simple question. If I were still struggling, still trying to make ends meet on my widow's pension, still creating art that you considered worthless, would you have reached out to reconnect? A long pause. I don't know. Maybe. Eventually. Be honest. Probably not, she admitted quietly. I was angry that you left without explaining yourself. I felt like you abandoned me when I was trying to help you. You felt like I abandoned you?
Yes.
One day you were living here, letting me support you, and the next day you were gone with just a note. It felt like you didn't trust me enough to tell me your plans. Heather, I left because you made it clear that you saw me as a burden. You destroyed my work, dismissed my dreams, and told me to get a real job. What exactly was I supposed to explain? You could have told me you were planning to move out. You could have given me a chance to apologize. And then what? You would have apologized, I would have stayed, and you would have continued treating my art like a phase you were waiting for me to outgrow. That's not true, isn't it? Tell me, Heather, what would you have said if I had told you I was planning to become a professional textile designer? Silence. You would have told me I was being unrealistic. You would have said I needed to focus on finding a practical job instead of chasing fantasies. You would have discouraged me from pursuing the very thing that has made me successful. Maybe. But you could have proven me wrong. I did prove you wrong. Just not in front of you. Mom, please. I know I made mistakes, but can't we start over? I promise I'll be more supportive now. Now that my support might benefit you? That's not... Okay, yes, I could use some help right now. But that's not the only reason I'm calling. What are the other reasons? Another long pause. I miss you. I miss having you in my life. You miss the idea of me, Heather. You miss having a mother who's proud of you and supportive of your dreams. But you never actually knew me. You never took the time to understand what mattered to me or what I was capable of achieving. I want to know you now.
Do you?
Or do you want to know the successful version of me? The version that might be useful to your business aspirations? Both, maybe. Is that so wrong? I considered her answer. At least she was being honest. Heather, I'll think about what you've said. But I want you to understand something. I'm not the same woman who lived in your spare room. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your support. And I don't owe you access to my success simply because we're related. Mom, I'll call you when I'm ready to talk again. Goodbye, Heather. I hung up and sat in the gathering darkness of my studio, surrounded by the fruits of my labor. Through my windows, I could see the city lights beginning to twinkle, each one representing someone else's dreams, someone else's struggles, someone else's victories. Heather had sounded genuinely remorseful, but she had also revealed that her primary interest in reconnecting was still fundamentally selfish. She wanted my success to rub off on her, wanted my connections to open doors for her, wanted my money to solve her problems. She still didn't understand that love and respect weren't the same thing. She still didn't understand that calling someone only when you needed something wasn't the same as having a relationship. But most importantly, she still didn't understand that I was no longer the woman who would sacrifice her own well-being to make her daughter's life easier. I turned back to my easel and picked up my brush. I had work to do, designs to create, a career to build. And I had learned that the most beautiful art came from the deepest solitude, the most profound silence. Let Heather sit with her regrets. I had better things to do with my time. 3 months after Heather's call, my life had taken on a rhythm of controlled public engagement that felt both exhilarating and surreal. The Pemberton House campaign had exceeded all expectations. My textile designs were being featured in luxury homes from Manhattan to Malibu, and the documentary about my creative process had won an award at the International Arts Film Festival. Suddenly, everyone in the design world wanted to work with the Phoenix artist, their term for someone who had risen to prominence later in life. The invitations had started arriving within weeks of the magazine features. Gallery openings, industry galas, private showings of new collections. At first, I declined them all, preferring the sanctuary of my studio. But Alexander had convinced me that occasional appearances would be good for business. "You don't have to become a social butterfly," he had said. "But showing your face a few times a year reminds people that you're real, that you're still creating. It adds mystique to the brand." So I had begun accepting select invitations, only the most prestigious events, only those that aligned with my aesthetic sensibilities. I attended quietly, dressed in elegant but understated clothes, speaking only when spoken to, maintaining the air of mystery that had become part of my professional persona. The invitation that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday morning in November. Heavy cream cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of formal elegance that signaled serious money and serious connections. Blackstone Luxury Goods requests the pleasure of your company at an exclusive preview of their 2024 designer collaboration collection, featuring original works by Marilyn Ashford. Thursday, November 18th, 7 p.m., the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York City. My work was being showcased at the Met. Patterns I had created in my modest townhouse studio would be displayed alongside pieces from their permanent collection, viewed by collectors, critics, and industry leaders from around the world. I stood in my kitchen, holding the invitation, and thought about the woman who had sat at Heather's table 18 months ago, watching wine destroy her hopes and dreams. That woman could never have imagined this moment. The preview was exactly the kind of high-profile event I usually avoided, but this was different. This was validation at the highest level, recognition that my work belonged in the same conversation as the greatest artists and designers in history. I called my stylist. Yes, I had a stylist now, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, who understood that my public image needed to reflect both my artistic sensibilities and my newfound status, and asked her to find something appropriate for the occasion. "This is huge, Marilyn," Claire said when I told her about the invitation. "The Met doesn't just showcase anyone. This is career-defining exposure." "I understand. We need to make sure you look absolutely perfect. Not flashy, not attention-seeking, but undeniably elegant. Museum-worthy, if you will." She found me a deep emerald silk dress that complemented my silver hair and brought out the green in my eyes. Simple lines, perfect tailoring, the kind of timeless elegance that looked expensive without being ostentatious. With my grandmother's pearls and a classic updo, I would look like exactly what I had become, a successful artist comfortable in the world of serious collectors. The flight to New York was my first time in first class, a small luxury that still felt surreal. I spent the journey reviewing the pieces that would be featured in the exhibition, marveling at how my patterns had been transformed into furniture, wallpapers, and accessories that would grace some of the most exclusive homes in the world. The Metropolitan Museum after hours was a different creature entirely. Without the crowds of tourists and school groups, the galleries felt sacred, hushed, filled with the weight of centuries of human creativity. I walked through the halls where my work would be displayed, trying to absorb the magnitude of what was happening. The preview itself was intimate, perhaps 50 people, all of them influencers in the world of luxury design. I recognized faces from magazine covers, names from gallery programs, voices that shaped trends and determined what the wealthy would covet next season. And there, in the center of the contemporary design gallery, were my patterns, transformed into wallpaper that covered an entire accent wall, upholstered furniture that looked like it belonged in a palace, accessories that turned functional objects into works of art. A small placard beside the display read, Ashford Textile Designs, Contemporary Patterns Rooted in Classical Tradition. Marilyn Ashford's work represents a unique synthesis of historical motifs and modern sensibilities, creating designs that speak to both timeless beauty and contemporary sophistication. I stood before my work, displayed in one of the world's most prestigious museums, and felt a profound sense of completion. This was what validation looked like.
This was what success felt like.
This was proof that art mattered, that creativity had value, that it was never too late to become who you were meant to be. Magnificent work, a voice said beside me. I turned to see an elegant woman in her 60s, impeccably dressed, studying my patterns with obvious appreciation. You must be very proud. I am, I said simply. Patricia Blackstone, she said, extending her hand. I'm honored to finally meet you. Your designs are exactly what we were hoping for, sophisticated enough for our most discerning clients, but accessible enough to appeal to a broader market. Patricia Blackstone, the founder and CEO of Blackstone Luxury Goods, a woman whose aesthetic choices influenced how the wealthy decorated their homes around the world. Thank you for this opportunity, I said. Seeing my work displayed here is beyond anything I could have imagined. You should imagine bigger things, she said with a smile. I have a feeling this is just the beginning for you. The evening continued with conversations that would have intimidated me a year ago, but now felt natural. Gallery owners who wanted to represent my work, interior designers who wanted to collaborate on custom pieces, collectors who wanted to commission original designs for their homes. I gave out my business cards sparingly, spoke about my work with quiet confidence, and maintained the professional distance that had become my trademark. I was friendly but not available, successful but not desperate, talented but not needy. As the evening wound down, I found myself near the museum's grand staircase, looking out over the city lights of Manhattan. A year and a half ago, I had been invisible, dismissed, living on the charity of a daughter who saw me as a burden. Now I was standing in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, surrounded by people who valued my work enough to pay millions for it. Excuse me, are you Marilyn Ashford? I turned to see a young woman with a notebook and camera, clearly a journalist who had somehow gained access to the private event. I'm Casey Williams from Design Today magazine. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about your meteoric rise in the design world. Your story is so inspiring, a widow who reinvented herself as a successful artist in her late 50s. Our readers would love to know more about your journey. A meteoric rise. Is that what this was? From the outside, perhaps it looked sudden, dramatic, like overnight success. But I knew the truth. This was the result of 30 years of developing my skills, 18 months of focused work, and the determination that came from being underestimated by someone who should have believed in me. I'm not giving interviews tonight, I said politely. But you can contact my representative if you'd like to discuss a feature. Just one quick question. What would you say to other women who think it's too late to pursue their dreams? I considered the question. What would I say to women like the one I used to be? Women who had been told their dreams were hobbies, their talents were worthless, their ambitions were embarrassing? I would say that other people's opinions of your potential are irrelevant, I said finally. The only question that matters is, what are you capable of creating when no one is watching? The journalist scribbled frantically. And what about family support? How important is it to have people who believe in you? I thought about Heather, probably sitting in her apartment right now, struggling to pay her bills while her mother's work was being celebrated at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Family support is wonderful when you have it, I said, but it's not required for success. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you that you don't need their approval to achieve your dreams. After the journalist left, I spent a few more minutes in the museum, memorizing the feeling of seeing my work displayed alongside pieces that would outlast all of us. Then I collected my coat and headed back to my hotel. On the plane home the next morning, I thought about what the journalist had said, a meteoric rise. But it didn't feel meteoric to me. It felt inevitable, like the natural result of finally being free to become who I had always been underneath the roles of wife, mother, caregiver. My phone buzzed with a text message. Heather. Mom, I saw photos from the Met event online. You looked incredible. I'm so proud of you. Can we please talk? I deleted the message without responding and turned my attention to the clouds outside my window. I had learned the value of silence, the power of making people wait for what they wanted from me. Heather would keep calling, keep texting, keep trying to insert herself into my success. But she would have to earn the right to be part of my life now, and earning required more than words. It required understanding what she had done wrong and demonstrating that she had changed. So far, I had seen no evidence of either. I closed my eyes and began mentally sketching a new design, something inspired by the classical columns of the museum, something that would capture the feeling of strength and permanence I had experienced standing in those hallowed halls. By the time I landed, I was eager to get back to my studio, back to the work that had saved me, back to the life I had built with my own hands and my own vision. Let Heather wait. I had art to create. The call came on a rainy Thursday afternoon in February, 6 months after the Metropolitan Museum exhibition. I was in my studio, working on a commission for a luxury hotel chain in Dubai, when my phone rang. Heather's name appeared on the screen, and as had become my habit, I let it go to voicemail. But something in her voice when I played the message back made me pause.
Mom, please.
I know you're angry with me, and I understand why, but I really need to talk to you. Something's happened, and I don't know what to do. Please call me back. She sounded different. Not demanding or entitled, but genuinely distressed. Against my better judgment, I called her back. Mom? Oh, thank God. I wasn't sure you'd call. What's wrong, Heather? Can we meet in person? I know you probably don't want to see me, but I really need to talk to you face to face. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Heather looked terrible, thin, pale, defeated. Gone was the confident woman who had destroyed my art. Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me get through it before you respond, okay? I nodded. I was wrong about everything. About your art, about your dreams, about what you were capable of. I destroyed something beautiful that you had created, and I dismissed your talent because I was stressed and frustrated and taking it out on the person who was safest to hurt. She told me about Marcus breaking up with her, calling her too negative and critical, about her failed business, about barely scraping by with a call center job. I kept thinking about how you would have encouraged me to keep trying, how you would have found ways to help me problem solve and stay motivated. And I realized that I had never, not once, given you that same support. She pulled out a small wrapped package, one of my original Weinstein designs, carefully preserved. I saved it. After you left, I found it in the trash, and I kept it. I look at it every day to remind myself of what I destroyed. What do you want from me, Heather? I want another chance. Not to be supported or rescued or fixed. I want a chance to be your daughter again, to be someone you can be proud of. For the first time in years, I saw genuine humility in her eyes. But I also knew that forgiveness couldn't be asked for and received immediately. Heather, forgiveness isn't something you can ask for and receive immediately. It's something that has to be earned over time, through consistent actions. I understand. And I need you to understand that I'm not the same woman I was when I lived in your apartment. I don't need your approval anymore. If we rebuild our relationship, it will be because I choose to, not because I need to. We finished our coffee talking about neutral topics. It felt strange, but not unpleasant. As we prepared to leave, Heather mentioned she had started taking pottery classes. Not because I think I'll be the next Marilyn Ashford, but because you showed me that creative expression can be healing. For the first time in our conversation, I smiled. I'd like to hear about your pottery sometime. We parted with a careful hug. I felt cautiously optimistic, but I knew one conversation didn't constitute real change. For months after our coffee shop meeting, I was beginning to believe that Heather might actually have changed. She had called twice a month with genuine questions about my work and updates about her pottery that didn't require anything from me. It was during this period of cautious rebuilding that Heather made what would turn out to be a catastrophic mistake. I was in my studio when my security system chimed. Someone was at my front gate. I checked the monitor and saw Heather standing outside, but she wasn't alone. A man in his 30s stood beside her, holding business documents. I pressed the intercom button. Heather, what are you doing here?
Mom, hi.
I'm sorry to drop by without calling, but I have someone I really want you to meet. This is David Preston from Creative Capital Investments. He has an incredible business proposition for you. My blood went cold. A business proposition. This wasn't a social visit. This was an ambush. I didn't agree to any meeting. I know, but David was only in town for today, and when I told him about your success, he was so excited to meet you. David stepped forward. Ms. Ashford, I represent investors who are very interested in expanding into the luxury art market. We could help you scale your business, reach new markets, really maximize your potential. Heather, step away from David for a moment. I want to speak with you privately. She moved closer to the intercom. Mom, this is exactly what we talked about. Building on your success.
We never talked about that.
We talked about you respecting my boundaries and not trying to insert yourself into my business. This isn't inserting myself. This is helping. Heather, did you call this man and tell him about my work without my permission? A pause. I mentioned that I knew a very successful textile designer. Did you give him my name? My address? Details about my income? Just general information. Did you promise him a meeting without asking me first? I told him I thought you might be interested. Without asking me first. David had grown impatient. Ms. Ashford, I understand you're cautious, but this is a legitimate opportunity. Security will be called if you're not gone in the next 60 seconds. I watched David gather his briefcase and stalk away, but Heather remained at the gate. Mom, please open the gate. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, Heather. This isn't what you think. I wasn't trying to manipulate you. I genuinely thought this would be good for your career. You contacted a stranger about my private business without my permission. You brought him to my home without my knowledge. How is that different from the way you used to treat my art as something you had the right to judge and manage? I was trying to help. I didn't ask for your help. I specifically told you that I don't need your help. Goodbye, Heather. I turned off the intercom and watched as she stood outside my gate for several more minutes before finally driving away. The violation of privacy and trust was staggering. For 4 months, I had allowed myself to hope that Heather had genuinely changed. But this incident proved that nothing had really changed at all. Over the next week, she tried multiple approaches: phone calls, texts, emails, even a handwritten letter. All contained variations of the same themes. This was a misunderstanding. Her intentions were good. I was overreacting. But there was one thing notably absent from all her communications: a genuine understanding of what she had done wrong. 2 weeks after the incident, I framed the wine-stained design she had given me during our reconciliation. But I didn't hang it as a symbol of forgiveness. I hung it in my studio as a reminder of why trusting Heather had been a mistake. I had given her a chance to prove she had changed, and she had failed spectacularly. 2 years later, I was standing in the private viewing room of the Meridian Gallery in London, watching collectors examine my latest series, Fractured Beauty, inspired by the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold. The irony wasn't lost on me. My life had been broken in Heather's kitchen that night almost 4 years ago, but I had repaired it with something more precious than gold: self-respect, independence, and the knowledge that I was valuable regardless of who chose to see that value. Ms. Ashford, the gallery director, approached with excitement. The entire collection has sold. The total value is £4.2 million. Plus, we have requests from 6 other galleries for future exhibitions. £4.2 million for a single collection. Almost 4 years ago, I had been dismissed as a woman playing with a hobby. My phone buzzed with a text from Heather. "Mom, I saw the article about your London exhibition. I'm so proud of you. Can we please talk?" I deleted the message without reading it twice. After the gallery event, I walked through Hyde Park, thinking about the journey from Heather's kitchen table to royal properties. I had done this alone. Every success achieved without her help or blessing. Back at my hotel, I called Sandra to share the news about the sales. "The Crown Estate purchased one of your pieces? You're going to be hanging in palaces. It doesn't feel real yet. How are you feeling about Heather these days?" "I don't think about her much anymore. She texted today, but I deleted it." "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" "I've already forgiven her, Sandra. But forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone back into your life who has proven repeatedly that they can't respect your boundaries." My phone rang. Heather, of course. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened to the message. "Mom, I know you're not answering my calls, but I really need to talk to you. I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I understand now why you cut me off. I'm in therapy now. Real therapy. I'm working on understanding why I always try to control situations instead of just supporting people." Her voice broke slightly. "I'm not asking you to call me back. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you try to teach me. That love isn't about what someone can do for you. It's about seeing their value and supporting their dreams." I saved the voicemail, but didn't respond. 3 months later, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a simple ceramic bowl with a note. "Mom, I made this in my pottery class. It's the first thing I've created that I'm truly proud of. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. I love you, Ash." The bowl was simple but well-crafted, showing real skill and dedication. I placed it on my desk where I could see it while I worked. Not as a symbol of reconciliation, but as evidence that perhaps some people could change. But I still didn't call her. A year later, I was featured on the cover of International Artist magazine as Designer of the Decade. When asked about family support, I said, "I had the support of people who believed in my vision. Sometimes the most important relationships are the ones you build, not the ones you inherit." I was 62 now, with silver hair that caught the light beautifully and lines that spoke of hard-earned wisdom. I looked like a woman who knew her worth. That evening, my phone rang. "Heather." For the first time in almost 2 years, I answered. "Hello, Heather."
Mom.
"I saw the magazine. You look incredible." "Thank you. I wanted to tell you how proud I am. Not proud like I had anything to do with your success, but proud like I'm honored to be your daughter, even if I haven't earned that honor." Cutting me off forced me to look at myself honestly, for the first time. "I've spent the past 4 years working to become someone worthy of your respect. And how's that going?" "Slowly. But Mom, whether we ever have a relationship again or not, you taught me the most important lesson of my life. That love isn't about what someone can give you. It's about who they are and how they treat people. I'm managing a pottery studio now. I'm helping other people discover the same peace in creating that you showed me." Despite my emotional distance, I felt a flicker of pride. "That's wonderful, Heather. I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry for hurting your feelings, but sorry for not seeing your value until the whole world was celebrating it. Sorry for not supporting your dreams when it would have mattered. After we hung up, I sat in my garden watching the evening light fade. 4 years of silence had apparently taught Heather things that no amount of conversation ever could. But I still wasn't ready to trust her with my heart again. Trust required sustained action over time, not just words. Still, for the first time in years, I felt cautious curiosity about who she might become. The ceramic bowl sat on my studio desk, a reminder that people could learn to create beautiful things if they were willing to do the work. In the meantime, I had art to create, a life to live on my own terms. I had learned that the most beautiful revenge wasn't destruction. It was living so well that other people's opinions became irrelevant. The final silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything I had built from the ashes of what others had tried to destroy.
And it was enough.
Thank you for joining Marilyn on this incredible journey of transformation and self-discovery. Her story reminds us that it's never too late to pursue our dreams, and that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is enforce boundaries with grace and determination. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember their own creative power. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real stories of resilience, justice, and the beautiful complexity of family relationships. And remember, your dreams matter, regardless of what anyone else thinks about them. The most important audience for your creativity is yourself. Until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and keep believing in your own magnificent potential.